I never imagined that a simple company party could change everything. It wasn't supposed to be anything out of the ordinary. But the moment I walked through those glass doors, I had no idea I was about to step into a nightmare I didn't see coming. It all started with a single, casual glance. I had no reason to suspect anything unusual that evening. Sarah, my wife, had been looking forward to this annual event for weeks. As usual, she looked stunning. She always did. The little black dress she wore hugged her figure perfectly, and the way her dark hair framed her face made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover. I've always been proud of her, but tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like she was more confident than usual, more at ease in her own skin. We arrived at the venue a little late, nothing unusual. A fancy ballroom filled with soft lighting, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. I'm not a big fan of social events, especially ones where I don't know most of the people. It always feels like I'm the odd one out. But Sarah assured me that everything would be fine. She always did that, reassured me, told me things would be okay. As she disappeared into the crowd of her colleagues, I felt that familiar sense of isolation creep in. I wandered over to the bar, trying to blend in, trying to relax. A glass of wine might help me ease into the night. As I sipped it, my eyes kept scanning the room. There was something off about tonight. But it wasn't until I saw him, standing across the room, talking to a group of Sarah's coworkers, that everything clicked. I'd seen him before. But tonight, he wasn't just any coworker. No, tonight, he was different. There was an air about him. He had that look, the kind of look that suggested he thought he was better than everyone else in the room. His name was Evan. He was in his early 30s, tall, with sharp features and an even sharper smile. And when he saw Sarah, his smile widened. Now, let me make one thing clear. I've never been one to jump to conclusions. I'm not the jealous type. But there was something about the way Evan looked at Sarah that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just admiration, it was something else. I've seen that look before. The kind of look that says, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm not afraid to let you see it. I watched as Sarah laughed at something Evan said. I couldn't hear their conversation over the noise of the crowd, but it didn't matter. The way she smiled at him, the way she touched his arm lightly when she spoke. There was a connection there. A connection I didn't think was possible. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But no matter how hard I tried to push the thought out of my mind, I couldn't. They were too comfortable with each other. Too familiar. I told myself to relax. I was being paranoid, right? Just because they were laughing doesn't mean anything. She's always friendly with her colleagues. She always laughs with people. But it wasn't just the laughter that caught my attention. It was the chemistry. I watched them closely. Every time Sarah leaned in to speak with him, every time their eyes locked, I felt a tightening in my chest. And when Evan looked back at me, his eyes lingered just a second too long. It was like he was daring me to notice. It was like he was saying, I'm in her world now, not you. And that's when it hit me. The unsettling feeling, the one I couldn't shake. It wasn't just paranoia. Something was going on. Something I hadn't been told. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I tried to push it all out of my mind. I wanted to have a good time, just like Sarah had promised. But the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. I couldn't stop watching them. Every word they exchanged, every laugh, every touch. It felt like a punch to the gut. I knew something was happening. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew this night wasn't going to be like any other night. This wasn't just a corporate party anymore. This was something else entirely. I could feel it, the shift in the air, the change in the energy between us. It wasn't just the party that felt different. It was her. It was us. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. But I didn't know how far it would go, how much I would lose, or how much I would regret not confronting it sooner. That night, I made a decision. I had to know the truth. Whatever it took, I was going to find out exactly what was going on between my wife and Evan. And it was going to cost me more than I ever imagined. The rest of the evening played out like a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, not the conversations around me, not the music playing in the background, not even the glass of wine I had clutched in my hand. Every part of me was fixated on Sarah and Evan. The way they stood close together, the way their bodies seemed to gravitate toward one another. It wasn't just friendly banter anymore. The subtle touches, the glances, everything was too familiar, too intimate. It was like they had a secret, something they were sharing, something I wasn't part of. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. After all, Sarah was a sociable person. She always made an effort with her colleagues, especially at these kinds of events. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But then, it happened again. I watched as Sarah laughed at something Evan said, her hand brushing his arm just a bit too gently. I couldn't be sure, but it felt deliberate, like she was drawing him in, inviting him to cross that invisible line between colleague and something more. The worst part? It wasn't just me who noticed. I could see it in the eyes of the other guests. I could see their glances, their knowing stares. It was like everyone else in the room could see it too. The way Evan and Sarah seemed so comfortable together, like they were in their own little world. And I, standing on the outside, was the one who didn't belong. I kept my distance, feeling more like a stranger at my own wife's side than ever before. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying herself. She was radiant, glowing even, but not because of me. It was as if Evan was the source of that glow. It gnawed at me, but I refused to confront it. I didn't want to be the insecure husband, the one who was too sensitive, too jealous. So, I bit my tongue and stayed in the background, hoping the night would pass without anything more. But then, I noticed something, Sarah's phone. It was subtle at first, just a glance, but I saw her reach into her bag and check it. It was a quick motion, but I knew it was more than just a casual check. She glanced at the screen, then quickly tucked the phone away. But something in the way she acted made my gut twist. I couldn't help it. It was like I had caught a glimpse of something I wasn't supposed to see. The way she'd hidden the phone, the sudden shift in her demeanor, it didn't sit right with me. I didn't want to pry. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But I couldn't ignore the feeling growing inside me. Something was off. I just couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't just the way Sarah had been acting with Evan. It was everything. The way she avoided eye contact with me, the way she seemed so absorbed in the conversation with him, like I wasn't even in the room. I couldn't help but wonder, was this a one-time thing, or had this been happening for longer than I knew? At some point, I lost track of time. I could see Sarah and Evan talking, laughing, but this time, it wasn't just the casual, professional tone. No, this time, there was an edge to it. There was something else in the air, something more than just pleasantries. It felt like they were sharing an inside joke, something only the two of them understood. And as I stood there, watching them from a distance, I realized something that hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just an innocent friendship. No, this was something deeper. Something that made my heart race and my mind spin. I had seen the way Evan looked at Sarah before, like she was something more than just a colleague. And tonight, it was crystal clear. He was into her. But the worst part? I wasn't sure if she felt the same way. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw Sarah do something that made my blood run cold. She leaned in to say something to Evan, her face inches from his, and for the briefest moment, I could have sworn their lips almost brushed. It was subtle, but it was there. That's when I knew. There was something going on. Something I hadn't seen before. Something that felt like it was slowly slipping out of my control. I didn't know what to do with this newfound realization. Confronting Sarah at the party wouldn't help, not when she was surrounded by her colleagues, all of whom seemed to be aware of the chemistry between her and Evan. But I couldn't just let this go. My mind raced, questions swirling. Had this been happening for a while? Was I just now noticing the signs? Or had I been too blind to see what was right in front of me? I excused myself and stepped outside for some air, trying to clear my head. The cold hit me like a slap, but it didn't help. The weight of the situation was suffocating. I needed answers, but I didn't know how to get them. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah and Evan, her laughing, her eyes sparkling, and him, standing just a little too close. I knew one thing for sure. Tonight wasn't going to end like the others. And by the time it was over, I wasn't sure I'd recognize the woman I had spent years of my life with. The night dragged on like a slow, inevitable march towards something I couldn't avoid. I kept telling myself to calm down, that maybe I was overreacting. After all, I was just a guy who didn't like social events. Maybe I was seeing things, reading too much into Sarah's interactions with Evan. But the more I tried to push it aside, the more undeniable the truth became. Something was happening, something I couldn't deny, no matter how hard I tried. I found myself retreating further into my own thoughts as the evening wore on. Sarah was caught up in conversation after conversation, floating through the room like she owned it. It was almost like she was a different person, like the woman I knew had vanished, replaced by someone who was suddenly too comfortable in a world that felt alien to me. It wasn't just Evan anymore. I could feel the entire atmosphere shifting around her. She wasn't my wife in this moment. She was someone else, someone who belonged here, surrounded by people who were more than just colleagues. They were admirers, friends, maybe even more. As Sarah moved across the room, laughing with another group of people, I caught sight of Evan once again. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching her intently. And then he did something that made my heart race. He took a step closer to her, reaching out as if to catch her attention. My blood ran cold as I watched Sarah turn around, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. The brief, private moment they shared made my stomach drop. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The way Sarah looked at him, the way her body moved slightly toward his, that was the moment I knew. It was clear. She wasn't just laughing with him anymore. She wasn't just being polite. There was a connection between them that was impossible to ignore, and I wasn't part of it. I stood there, a silent witness to something I couldn't control, something I had no idea how to confront. The more I watched them, the more I realized how distant we had become. The woman I had married was standing there with someone else, sharing a moment I would never have with her. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I didn't know how to process it. I excused myself from the group I was with, finding a quieter corner of the room where I could gather my thoughts. My mind was racing, each thought more frantic than the last. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and watch them. I couldn't let this go without understanding what was happening. But how? How did I confront something that I wasn't sure was even real? How could I approach Sarah without looking like the jealous, paranoid husband? The music played softly in the background, and I could hear the laughter and clinking of glasses, but it all felt so distant, so far away from where I was mentally. I couldn't even remember the last time I felt this disconnected from Sarah. She had always been the center of my world. I supported her, cheered her on, and never questioned her loyalty. But now, it seemed like I didn't even know her anymore. It was as if this stranger, Evan, had taken my place in her life. I needed clarity. I needed answers. But I couldn't find the courage to go back to her and ask the questions that had been haunting me for the last few hours. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on me, the tension in my chest rising with every passing second. I stood there, staring at the floor, lost in my own thoughts, when I heard someone approach. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The voice was too familiar. It was Sarah. She had come to find me. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice warm with concern. But it didn't reach me the way it usually did. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just a mask, a facade she wore to cover something deeper, something she wasn't ready to share with me. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I should act like everything was fine or if I should finally confront her. The truth was, I didn't even know if I was ready to hear the truth. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile, hoping it looked genuine. "Just needed some air." Sarah stood there for a moment, studying me, her eyes lingering just a little too long. "You've been so quiet tonight," she said, her voice carrying an edge of concern that I didn't quite believe. "You've barely said a word since we got here." She was right. I hadn't been myself. But how could I explain that the reason I couldn't speak, the reason I couldn't act normal, was because my entire perception of her was crumbling before my eyes? How could I tell her that I felt like a ghost in her life? Before I could respond, I saw Evan once again. This time, he was walking across the room toward us, his eyes never leaving Sarah. I couldn't look away either. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I was drawn into their world, and it felt like I was losing her, bit by bit, piece by piece. When Evan reached us, he put on that same confident smile, the one that made my blood boil every time. He greeted Sarah with a quick hug, his arm brushing hers in that familiar way that made my stomach turn. "Sarah, I was just telling everyone how lucky they are to have you in the office," he said, his voice smooth and casual, but his eyes were too intense. It wasn't the kind of thing someone says to a colleague unless they mean something by it. It wasn't the kind of compliment I'd expect in the casual work environment I was used to. I watched Sarah smile at him, her eyes glowing in a way that made my heart drop even further. She was playing along, and it hurt more than I ever thought it could. It was like she was in on a joke that I wasn't a part of. And I had to wonder, how far did this go? How much had she let herself get lost in whatever this was with him? And most importantly, why was I still standing here, pretending nothing was wrong? As I stood there, paralyzed by the weight of the situation, I realized something. I couldn't just stand on the sidelines anymore. I had to do something. The truth couldn't stay hidden for much longer, and I wasn't going to let it tear me apart quietly. I needed to confront Sarah. I needed to know where we stood. The atmosphere in the room felt suffocating as the evening wore on. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, all of it felt like a distant echo. I could barely focus on anything other than Sarah and Evan, and the growing knot in my stomach that I couldn't ignore any longer. Every word Sarah said, every glance she shared with him, was like a nail in the coffin of my trust. It wasn't just about jealousy anymore. It was about the crushing realization that something was happening between them that I couldn't control. Something that was slowly pushing me further and further out of the picture. As the night dragged on, I found myself drifting further away from Sarah, both physically and emotionally. She seemed to be caught up in the world of her colleagues, lost in conversation after conversation, always laughing, always smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile I recognized. It was different. It was more than just politeness. It was the kind of smile you give when you're genuinely enjoying someone's company. And that someone, in this case, was Evan. I had always trusted Sarah. We had been together for years, and I thought we knew each other inside and out. But tonight, as I watched her talk with Evan, I realized just how little I actually knew. She had always been the confident, charismatic woman I loved, but now, she seemed almost distant. It wasn't just the way she was laughing with him or the way they stood so close to each other. It was the way she looked at him. It was like she was seeing him in a way that she didn't see me anymore. And the worst part? I didn't know when it had started. How long had this been going on? How many times had I missed the signs, too busy being the supportive husband, too blind to see that something was slipping away from me? I kept trying to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking things. But the longer I watched them, the more the feeling settled into the pit of my stomach. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop wondering if this was just the beginning. If tonight was just the first step in something I wasn't prepared for. At some point, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. I had to confront her. But how? How could I ask her what was really going on when I wasn't even sure if I could trust my own instincts? What if I was just being paranoid? What if I was imagining something that wasn't even there? But then again, what if I wasn't? I stepped outside onto the balcony, needing to escape the noise of the party, the laughter, and the murmurs of the crowd. The cold air hit me like a shock to the system, but it didn't help clear my head. I could still hear the muffled sounds of the party in the distance, and my mind kept replaying the images of Sarah and Evan. I needed answers. I needed to know where I stood, where we stood. But how could I ask the woman I loved about something so painful, so potentially devastating? As I stood there, staring into the dark night, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Sarah. Of course, it was her. She had come to find me, just like I knew she would. But I wasn't ready to face her yet. Not like this. Not with everything I was feeling, everything I hadn't said. I stayed silent, hoping she would just go back inside, but she didn't. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the stone floor as she stopped just a few feet away from me. "Are you okay?" she asked again, her voice soft. But there was something in it that made me hesitate. Was it guilt? Was it concern? Or was it just the same rehearsed line she had used every time I had pulled away, every time I had tried to distance myself from her in the past? "I'm fine," I said, turning to look at her, but my words felt empty. I knew she could see right through me. She had to. She always could. "You don't seem fine," she said, taking a step closer. "You've been distant all night. What's going on?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. I wanted to tell her everything, to ask her what was really going on, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile, something that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just tired, I guess. You know how these things go." She didn't seem convinced. She took another step closer, her expression softening. "If something's bothering you, you know you can tell me." But could I? Could I really tell her what I was feeling without sounding like a jealous fool? Could I ask her about Evan without coming off as insecure? How could I confront her when I wasn't even sure if I was ready to hear the truth? Before I could say anything, Evan appeared in the doorway, his silhouette casting a shadow across the floor. "Everything all right out here?" he asked, his voice casual, too casual. There was something about the way he spoke that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the tone, it was the fact that he had come looking for Sarah, like he knew exactly where to find her. Like he belonged here, in this moment, in a way I didn't. I was just checking on him, Sarah said quickly, her gaze shifting between me and Evan. But there was a hesitation in her eyes, one I didn't miss. For a moment, I wondered if she was more aware of the situation than I was, if she was starting to realize that I was no longer the man she had married. Or maybe it was just the awkwardness of being caught between two men who were both too invested in her. Evan didn't seem to notice the tension. He gave me a friendly smile, the kind that felt more like a challenge than a greeting. Well, I hope you're enjoying yourself. Don't let this guy drag you away from all the fun, he said, with a wink that made my blood run cold. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt something snap. This guy? I was standing there, barely holding it together, and he was treating me like a joke. Like I didn't matter. Like I was invisible. And I could see it in Sarah's eyes. She wasn't just smiling for show anymore. She was caught up in something that was bigger than both of us, and I had no idea how to stop it. For the first time that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to stand by and let Evan continue to play his games. I wasn't going to let Sarah slip away without a fight. Something had to give, and it was going to be me who demanded answers. No more pretending. No more standing in the shadows. I was going to confront this head-on, no matter what it cost me. I stood there, my body tense as Evan's presence lingered between us. The moment felt like a slow-motion crash, where every word, every second seemed to drag on forever. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at him, then at Sarah. Something had to break, something had to change, and I knew that if I didn't act now, this uneasy tension would continue to grow until it consumed everything I had built with her. The facade of politeness, of pretending everything was fine, it had to stop. I couldn't pretend anymore. The reality of what was happening between Sarah and Evan was undeniable, and I needed to face it head-on. As Sarah smiled awkwardly, trying to bridge the tension between Evan and me, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was caught in a web of her own making, spinning a story that didn't match the truth. I could see it in her eyes. She was no longer the woman I had known, the one who had always been open and honest. Now, she seemed distant, lost in the social game of the corporate world, and I was the one left holding on to the past. Evan's presence only amplified the growing distance between Sarah and me. He was the embodiment of everything I wasn't: charming, confident, effortlessly part of the group, and I was just me. I was the quiet, steady husband who had never made waves, who had always been supportive, always in the background. But tonight, I was anything but invisible. I could feel the shift in the room, the invisible divide growing between Sarah and me, and Evan seemed to be the one drawing the lines. "Why don't we head back inside?" Evan said, his tone light and carefree. It was as if nothing was wrong. But I knew better. There was something behind his words, something that was slowly unraveling everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Actually, I think I need to speak with Sarah for a moment," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Evan raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Sure, no problem," he said, not even pretending to be concerned. "I'll catch you guys later." With that, he turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone with Sarah on the balcony. The moment he was gone, I could feel the tension settle in the air, thick and heavy. Sarah turned to face me, her expression soft but guarded. She was trying to maintain the calm, collected exterior she had perfected, but I could see the unease in her eyes. It wasn't just guilt. It was something deeper, something that told me she knew exactly what was happening, and she was trying to pretend it wasn't. "What's going on?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. There was no turning back now. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of everything I had been holding in. "Why does it feel like I'm the one left in the dark? What's happening with you and Evan?" Her face froze, and for a moment, I could see the flicker of uncertainty pass through her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she glanced away, her gaze falling to the ground. I watched her closely, waiting for an answer, but none came. I stepped closer, my frustration building. "Sarah, look at me," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I need to know. What's going on between you two? Don't lie to me." She looked up at me then, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. For a brief moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth, but instead, she took a step back. "It's not what you think," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't buy it. The words were too rehearsed, too empty. Then what is it, Sarah? I pressed, my patience wearing thin. Because I'm not stupid. I've seen the way you look at him, the way he looks at you. And I can't just stand here and pretend like everything's fine when I know something's wrong. She was silent for a long time, her eyes searching mine, but I could see her struggling. The words were stuck in her throat, like she was trying to find a way to explain something that didn't have an easy explanation. I could feel the silence stretching out between us, thick and suffocating. I was standing at the edge of something I didn't want to face, but I knew I had to. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was real, and it was happening right in front of me. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I never meant for it to happen like this, she said, almost as if she were speaking to herself. It just happened. My heart sank as I realized what she was saying. The weight of her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. So it's true then, I said, my voice barely a whisper, as if the words themselves were too painful to say out loud. There's something going on between you and him. Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time that night, I saw vulnerability in her. The wall she had built around herself began to crack, but I wasn't sure if it was too late to rebuild what we had. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling. But somewhere along the way, I got lost. I didn't know how to talk to you about it, about everything. I didn't know what to say. The woman I loved, the woman I had shared everything with, was standing in front of me, admitting to something I never thought possible. My mind was racing, but all I could focus on was the pain in her eyes. She wasn't just telling me about a momentary lapse in judgment. She was telling me that something had shifted between us, something deep and irreversible. As I stood there, struggling to process everything, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The life I thought I knew, the marriage I thought I understood, was crumbling. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me more than anything. I had no idea how to fix this. I had no idea how to fix us. The silence that hung between us felt suffocating, like a weight I couldn't escape. I watched Sarah's face, her eyes darting between mine, as if she was searching for something, some sort of redemption, some way to make this all go away. But it was too late for that. The truth was out in the open now, and I could see the cracks in our relationship that I'd ignored for so long. I had let her drift, let her slip away without asking the hard questions, without confronting the subtle changes that had been building between us. Sarah, you can't just say it happened, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. I need to know what exactly happened. I deserve that much, don't I? The words spilled out before I could stop them, and I could feel my chest tightening, my heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't just about her and Evan anymore. This was about me, about everything I had believed to be true being ripped away. She looked at me, her face pale, but there was no hiding the guilt in her expression. She opened her mouth, but no words came. It was like she was trying to find the right thing to say, but there were no words that could fix this, no explanation that would make it okay. I never meant for you to find out this way, she whispered, her voice faltering. I never meant for it to go this far. The way she said it, like she was confessing, like she was apologizing, only made the situation worse. I wasn't sure what I had expected her to say, but it wasn't that. She didn't seem sorry enough. She wasn't pleading for forgiveness, she wasn't breaking down. Instead, it was as if she was resigned to the fact that this was the way things were now. Then what did you mean, Sarah? I demanded, stepping closer, my voice louder now, more intense. How far did this go? Tell me everything, because I need to know the truth. I can't live with half of it. She looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her dress, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She didn't want to tell me. I knew that much. She didn't want to open up, didn't want to admit to what she had done. It was as if admitting it all would somehow make it real, would confirm that everything I feared had been true. And yet, we were standing at this crossroads, and there was no going back. It's not what you think, she said again, her voice trembling. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt us. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Then why did you? Why did you let it go this far? Why him? Her gaze flickered to the door where Evan had disappeared back into the party. I followed her gaze, and for a moment, I imagined what she must have seen in him, what I had failed to offer. Charm, attention, something I hadn't been able to provide lately. And I felt a sickening sense of dread settle deep within me. It wasn't just the betrayal I was feeling. It was the realization that I hadn't been enough. Evan, he was there for me, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. He listened when you didn't. He paid attention when I needed it. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere, I swear. But then, I started looking forward to seeing him. I started. She trailed off, the weight of her confession hanging in the air like a cloud. I took a step back, my mind racing. It felt like I had been hit by a train. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared for the truth to be this ugly, this raw. You started what? I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. Started what, Sarah? Liking him? Wanting him? She winced, as if the words themselves were a slap to her face. I don't know, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't plan any of it. It just happened. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away, but it didn't. And now I've messed everything up. I've messed us up. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know how to process what she was telling me. I couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved for years, had found comfort in someone else's arms. I had never seen it coming. I wish you had told me, I said, my voice barely audible. I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me. But instead, you let it fester. You let it grow. And now, I couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't even say what I was thinking because the reality of it was too overwhelming. What now? What happened to us now? Could we fix this? Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look at her the same way? I was afraid, Sarah said, her eyes filled with tears. I was afraid of losing you, of losing us. So, I kept it to myself. And now I've destroyed everything. The weight of her words crushed me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that, deep down, I knew she was right. She had kept it to herself because she thought she could fix it on her own, thought she could keep it hidden, keep it from me. And in the process, she had created a rift that felt too wide to bridge. I stood there, staring at her, my mind and heart at war with each other. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her that everything could be okay. But another part of me wanted to walk away, to never look back. Because no matter how much I loved her, no matter how long we had been together, this was something I couldn't easily forget. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. I turned away from her, taking a few steps toward the door. I need some time, Sarah, I said, my voice cold, detached. I need to think. I can't do this right now. Her voice trembled as she called after me, but I didn't stop. Please, don't leave me like this, she pleaded, but I couldn't look back. I walked out into the night, the weight of everything settling in. I had no idea what was going to happen next. I didn't know if there was even a chance for us. But one thing was clear, I had to figure it out on my own. The cold night air bit at my skin as I stepped out of the party, the dim lights of the venue slowly fading behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Sarah's words echoed in my mind, but I was too overwhelmed to process them fully. I needed space. Space from her, space from everything that had just been laid bare. My mind was a storm, a whirlwind of confusion, betrayal, and anger. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship was shattered in an instant, and now I was left standing on the precipice, unsure of where to go. I walked aimlessly down the street, my footsteps loud in the otherwise silent night. I had no destination in mind, no clear idea of what I was supposed to do next. I just needed to get away, to think, to figure out what the hell was going on. It was hard to even wrap my mind around the fact that Sarah had let it happen, that she had let someone else into our life, into our marriage, without so much as an apology. She had crossed a line, and I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. But what did that mean for me? What did that mean for us? The questions swirled in my head, but no answers came. I felt a pang of guilt gnaw at me, guilt for walking away, for leaving her in the middle of everything. But another part of me was just numb. I was too hurt, too angry, to deal with this right now. I needed distance. I needed clarity. I ended up at a small park nearby, one that Sarah and I had walked through 1,000 times together. The bench we used to sit on was empty now, cold and abandoned in the quiet of the night. I sat down, my body feeling heavier than it ever had before. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like 1,000 pounds, and for the first time, I wondered if we were even salvageable. Could I ever forgive her? Could I ever rebuild what had been broken? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, seeing Sarah's name flash across the screen. My heart clenched. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear what she had to say. Not until I figured out where I stood. Not until I knew what I wanted. But then the text came through, and it hit me like a punch in the stomach. I didn't mean to lose you. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. Please, talk to me. I'm so sorry. Please, don't leave me. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The sincerity in her words made me want to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after the way she had betrayed me. Her apology felt empty. Too little, too late. I leaned back against the bench, staring up at the stars, trying to make sense of everything. I kept thinking back to the moment when I had asked her about Evan. The way she looked at me, like she was trapped in a corner. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Fear of losing me. Fear of everything unraveling. But was that enough? Was it enough for me to forgive her? I remembered the way she had looked at him, how her face lit up when he entered the room. It wasn't just admiration. It was something more, something deeper. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about Evan anymore. It was about us. It was about the cracks in our relationship that had been there long before he ever came into the picture. It was about the distance that had been growing between us for months, maybe even longer. But I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I could. As I sat there, the phone buzzed again. It was her. Another text, another plea. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but please don't give up on us. I love you. Please. I felt my chest tighten at her words. She loved me. But had she really? Or had she just loved the version of me that had been easy to ignore, the version of me who didn't ask questions, who didn't confront the problems between us? The thought of her with Evan, of how they had grown so close, was like a dagger to my chest. I thought about the way she had acted tonight, the way she had laughed with him, the way she had looked at him. It wasn't just a slip-up. It wasn't just an accident. It was a betrayal. And I didn't know if I could ever see her the same way again. My thoughts were interrupted by a voice, soft, tentative. Hey. I looked up, startled. There she was, Sarah, standing in front of me, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. I hadn't heard her approach. She looked fragile, like the weight of everything was finally sinking in. I couldn't stay inside, she said softly. I couldn't just let you walk away without trying to fix this. I'm so sorry, so sorry. Her voice cracked, and I could see the genuine pain in her eyes. But pain wasn't enough. Pain didn't undo what had already been done. I stood up, taking a step back. Sarah, I don't know what to say. The words felt like lead in my mouth. I don't know if I can forgive you. Her face fell, and I saw a flicker of desperation in her eyes. She reached out, her hand trembling as if she were afraid I would walk away again. Please, she whispered. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt my own heart twist, but I couldn't let it blind me. I couldn't let the pain of what we had together cloud my judgment. I don't know what to do with all of this, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of my emotions. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. She looked like I had struck her, her face crumpling with the realization that I wasn't going to forgive her right away. But, I love you, she said, her voice breaking. I've always loved you. The words hung in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I wanted to believe her, but every part of me was screaming that I needed to protect myself, that I couldn't just let this go without consequences. And as I stood there, facing her, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea where this would go. I didn't know if we could ever rebuild what we had. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened, everything was about to change. The night stretched on, but for the first time in what felt like forever, the world around me seemed to slow down. Sarah stood before me, her eyes filled with a quiet desperation, waiting for something, waiting for me to make a decision. The silence between us felt deafening, but in that silence, I realized something important. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not on us. For all the hurt, for all the betrayal, there was still something in me that wanted to fight for this. Maybe it wasn't the same as it had been before, but I wasn't ready to walk away from everything we had built together without at least trying to fix it. I'm not going to lie, I said, my voice quieter now, softer. What you did, it hurt. It hurt more than I can put into words. But I also know this isn't the end. I'm not giving up on us. Not yet. Sarah's breath caught, and I could see the relief flooding her face, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you sure you can forgive me? I nodded, taking a step toward her. I don't know if I can forgive you overnight, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to fight for what we have, even if it means it's going to take time. But we have to be honest with each other from now on. No more lies, no more hiding. I can't do this if we're not both in it, fully. Sarah's tears started to fall again, but this time, they weren't tears of guilt or shame. They were tears of relief. She stepped forward, closing the gap between us, and when I reached out, she fell into my arms, holding on to me like she never wanted to let go. I love you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've always loved you. I never wanted to hurt you. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I know you will, I replied, holding her tightly. We'll get through this, together. But we have to start over. We have to rebuild. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. The road ahead would be difficult, and it would take time to heal the wounds that had been caused. But standing there, holding Sarah in my arms, I realized something. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about the willingness to face the pain, to confront the mistakes, and to choose each other every single day, even when it's hard. We didn't need to have all the answers right then and there. We just needed to take that first step. And in that moment, I knew we were both ready to take it. Sarah pulled back slightly, looking up at me with a faint smile. You know, it's not going to be easy, she said, her voice more confident now. But I think we can make it through. I smiled back, the weight on my chest easing, just a little. Yeah, I said, I think we can. And as we stood there, the world didn't seem as dark as it had a few hours ago. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time that night, it felt like it was within reach. We had both made mistakes, but that didn't mean the end. It meant a chance to start over, a chance to rebuild. And together, I knew we could do it.